Apple has released 17 iterations of their iPhones, each bringing something new or revolutionary to the table. However, the rate of innovation has tremendously slowed down since the very first one. Nowadays, you can't really tell the difference between an iPhone 14 Pro or a 15 Pro without close inspection. For the last few years, the iPhone has been perfect. We finally have USB-C, a bright ProMotion display, an excellent camera system with long zoom ranges and really good battery life. All of the cons that previous iPhones had are gone, but none of this is innovative or revolutionary. Other companies have already done it 2 or 3 years before Apple. In all honesty, Apple has been lazy with the iPhone, but that wasn't always the case. There's one iPhone. This iPhone completely changed the way the iPhone looked and felt to use. It was the beginning of a new era for the iPhone. This iPhone not just changed the way iPhones work, but other phones too. I think you already guessed which one it is. This is the iPhone 10, not X. 10. The iPhone 10 is the most important iPhone Apple has released ever since the iPhone 2G. It marks the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, and this phone started a new chapter by changing everything everyone knew about the iPhone. Honestly, this is peak iPhone. It was when Apple threw everything they had to make the iPhone special. By 2017, the iPhone started feeling rather stale. They all felt and functioned the same way. The iPhone 6, 6S, 7 and 8 basically looked the same. And the Android side started getting hyper competitive by releasing phones that looked futuristic. But Apple went beyond that by releasing a phone that actually looked futuristic. It wasn't the full display phone future that we were promised by concepts, but something very close to it. Maybe the 2027 iPhone will be the phone of our dreams. And honestly, this design is timeless. It's very simple, very modern. Actually, looking at it, it looks better than newer iPhones. It's built out of stainless steel and glass, which scream premium. In 2017, it was a big deal. Every other phone is either built out of aluminium or plastic. It's 2023 and it's still the same case. The highest-end iPhone now swaps out stainless steel for titanium, while every other high-end phone is still built out of aluminium. The materials don't add any functional benefits to the phone. In fact, it makes the phone heavier. However, they contribute to the premium price you're paying for this phone. This phone costed $999. At that time, it was the most expensive phone you could get, and you were getting premium build quality for it. It felt and looked premium. This phone is easier to hold than newer iPhones, partly due to its size and curved edges. This is the perfect sized iPhone. It's not too big or too small. The stainless steel frame met perfectly with the curved glass on the front and back. The back had a slight shimmer which looked very good when the light struck it. There were only 2 colors, space grey and silver, but both of these colors were super classy. This was the first iPhone that did wireless charging thanks to the glass back and has IP67 water resistance. The cameras were arranged in an oval shape where the flash and mic were all in it. This gave off a very clean and minimal look. But this design did come with some downsides. As I said earlier, this phone is heavy for its size. The stainless steel rails are glossy like the back, which makes it pretty slippery. And the frame had a thin layer of PVD coating, which led to the paint scraping off pretty easily on the space grey one with everyday wear and tear. Easy had to make your space grey iPhone 10 silver. Someone actually did it. The front had the cameras and sensors tucked behind a notch. Aside from the memes, this notch ensured that the display went edge to edge and brought a new authentication system, Face ID. This wasn't your typical 2D face scanner, but one that used IR and dot projectors to create a 3D map of your face. It can't be easily fooled like other face scanning systems, but it's not perfect. Even after 7 iterations, it often fails to scan your face properly. This first iteration of it on the iPhone 10 is slow and won't work if you're wearing a mask or trying to unlock it from multiple angles. It also won't work on landscape, but it was a good alternative to Touch ID. It felt seamless when it worked properly, and you can create animojis. Does anyone even use them? This notch was copied by a lot of Android phones in 2018, but none of them had the same advanced sensors like the iPhone 10. They copied it just to look like the iPhone 10, but they all forgot to copy another element of the iPhone 10, the display. This display is beautiful. It was the best display you could find on any phone at that time. It was Apple's first OLED iPhone, and they made sure it matched all the qualities of their LCD displays and went beyond that. It was bright, vibrant, had great color accuracy, high resolution, added support for True Tone, which changed the display's temperature to match your lighting. It also supported HDR video playback with Dolby Vision and 3D Touch. which is the best feature they sadly removed on newer iPhones. I've talked a lot about 3D touch in my older videos. In a nutshell, the display responds to the force you applied to the screen, and your actions felt intentional with 3D touch, like force pressing on the flash or peeking into mail. But there is another thing this display has that many high-end phones in 2023 lack: symmetrical bezels. Apple achieved this by folding the display components behind the display. This is an expensive process, but it makes the bezels around the phone even and gives off a very modern and futuristic look. Every phone that copies the notch had this ugly chin at the bottom, which looks very cheap. No other company would go as far as Apple to make their 10th anniversary phone special. But you know what else would be a 10? A sub to this channel. I'm on the race to hit 8,000 subs by the end of this year, so make that happen. On the software side, iOS 11 introduced non-linear animations, which means any animation that occurs responds to how the user interacts. It works somewhat like 3D touch. If you swipe slowly, the animation is gradual, but if you swipe quickly, it also responds quickly. The iPhone 10 introduced a new way to navigate the iPhone. This was the first iPhone with no home button. It replaced it with swipe gestures. You swipe up to unlock, swipe up to go home, swipe and hold to summon recent apps, and swipe from the top right corner for control center. The entire interface relies on these gestures. These gestures and animations make the phone very smooth to use. Many Android phones copied these swipe gestures in 2018, but it's 2023 and they still haven't gotten it right. Some of them started copying the non-linear animations too. The iPhone 10 is still fast even today. The A11 Bionic chip in it is no slouch. It was faster than any phone in 2017, 2018, or even 2019. It handles basic tasks without any hiccups. It does struggle a bit with intensive tasks now as apps and games have become heavier. Gaming is good as long as you don't push it too hard. You can run any app you want without many issues. It feels close enough to using on your iPhone. Remember, this phone is 6 years old. There's no way any Android phone from 2017 will be as good as this in modern tasks. The iPhone 10 got updates till iOS 16, but sadly it did not get iOS 17. iOS 16 is the worst iOS update. It's super buggy, crashes often, and it's not a great experience on the iPhone 10. Many of the new features aren't supported. The iPhone 10 definitely has a performance to hold up with iOS 17. iPadOS 17 runs on iPads with A10 chips, and iPadOS 17 shares the same code base with iOS 17. This all feels like a move to make iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and 10 users to get a new phone. Apple made a mistake by leaving their best phone on the buggiest update ever. The performance also helped the cameras a lot. It had a dual camera setup similar to the iPhone 8 Plus, except that the telephoto lens had OIS and a slightly wider aperture. This is the last iPhone before Apple started implementing any of their smart image processing tricks, and the photos are pretty good. Daytime shots are crisp and sharp, and the dynamic range is on point. In low light, it holds up pretty well. Since it had a telephoto lens, it offered portrait mode, and the shots are okayish. If you compare it with newer phones, I'm surprised it can keep up with them in daylight. It doesn't have any of the computational photography tricks, so at night, any newer iPhone destroys it. The video is good. It does 4K at up to 60 FPS and it has enough dynamic range. Obviously, it's not as good as newer iPhones which do Dolby Vision HDR, cinematic mode, and even ProRes log. But the iPhone 10 does the job. It's pretty good for Instagram Reels and TikToks. The front camera does a decent job. Since this whole camera setup has no sort of extra processing, the skin tones are natural and it does a decent job at night. This was the first iPhone that did portrait mode on the front, and this is so much better than the back camera in terms of edge accuracy. The video on the front is good. It does 1080p at up to 30 FPS, which yes is on the lower side for resolution, but it's not as bad as you think. I really love the unprocessed look the photos have with iPhone 10. The battery life was better than the iPhone 8, but not as good as the iPhone 8 Plus. You know what's funny? Most of the space inside the phone was taken up by the battery. This phone would easily last you a day, but not more than that. The one I have here has 77% battery health and no sense of performance degradation whatsoever. When the iPhone 2G was 6 years old, it was by no means usable. It looked and felt very out of date. It's surprising to me how relevant the iPhone 10 is in 2023. It still feels like a newer iPhone, and I'm sure an average user would have no issues using it for another year. It's a bummer that the iPhone 10 won't get any major updates anymore, but that doesn't make it unusable. It's still a solid phone. I'm really excited to see what's in store for the future with the iPhone. I'm sure we will see a bezel-free iPhone by 2027, in time for the 20th anniversary of the iPhone. However, I do feel it won't have as much as innovation as the iPhone 10. As smartphones have peaked, there isn't a whole lot that could be changed or improved, and that's pretty evident with how the upgrades have been between each iteration. And that's why I feel the iPhone 10 is peak iPhone. It got a lot of things right, brought a lot of innovation and features that are still present on newer iPhones, and it looks very modern. You can find it for about $150 used, but I would recommend you get the iPhone XS as it brought a lot of meaningful upgrades and supports iOS 17. But if you want something that's cheap and provides the modern iPhone experience, the iPhone X is perfect for that. If you want to see how I survived with a Windows phone in 2023, click here.